Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're demystifying a conceptual map of modern web navigation. Our source material gives us this highly specific directory tree, labeled simply 6 routing, and we are going to translate this technical framework into something a bit more relatable, a city transit journey. So let's just dive right in and break down this routing tree branch by branch.
So think about it for a second. How do modern web apps actually move you around without ever refreshing the page? I mean, we all remember the old days, right? Suffering through those blank white screens and spinning loaders for literally every single click. Well, the toolset from our source material, React Router, was designed to solve this exact problem. It seamlessly swaps the scenery on your screen, all while keeping you firmly anchored in the exact same application. It's totally seamless.
Okay, here's our quick roadmap for today. First, the routing foundation. Second, nested and dynamic paths. Third, parameters and passing data. And finally, navigation and security.
Starting with Section 1, the routing foundation. It's time to lay down some digital pavement.
Okay, tracing the top-level hierarchy from our source text, we start right at the root 6, routing. That branches directly into React Router. And from there, we hit our very first major functional components, the browser router and then routes. We really need to anchor ourselves right here in this tree before we zoom in any closer, because these steps, they represent the absolute core infrastructure of our entire digital transit system. Basically, without these, absolutely nothing else on the map works.
So, think of the browser router as the literal foundation, or better yet, the city limits of our application. It's this wrapper that surrounds everything, basically standing there telling the app, hey, everything happening inside these borders, yeah, that's part of our transit system. It is the environment that makes all further navigation possible. Without the browser router, your web app just doesn't know how to read the map.
Right, but once you're inside those city limits, you still need to know where to go. And that brings us to the next branch in our source text, routes. If the browser router is the city limit, the routes are the critical road signs strategically placed at every single intersection. When a user types in a specific URL or just clicks a link, these routes read that address and physically point the browser toward the intended destination. They act like traffic controllers. They make sure that if you ask for the About Us page, you don't accidentally end up in the shopping cart. Moving right along to Section 2, nested and dynamic paths. This is where we handled the really complex architectures. Now, a nested route is exactly what it sounds like, a route placed inside another route. Imagine you walk into a massive department store. That store is your main route. But once you're inside, you want to go to the men's clothing section, and then specifically to the shoe department, right? So men's clothing is nested inside the store, and shoes are nested inside men's clothing. React Router uses nested routes in this exact same hierarchical way. It allows developers to build beautifully complex, multi-layered layouts without ever losing track of where the user is actually standing. But what happens when the destination isn't fixed? That brings us to dynamic routes, which is the very next branch in our source tree. Because let's be real, not every road can be hard-coded. Sometimes the road needs to adapt based on who is traveling on it. Think of dynamic routes as the highly adaptable roads of our map. If you're looking at a user profile, the app doesn't go and build a million different hard-coded roads for a million different users. No way. Instead, it builds one dynamic route, a flexible template that instantly shifts and shapes itself based on the exact user ID being searched for. It is incredibly efficient.
All right, Section 3, parameters and passing data. Basically, how our system carries passenger information.
Now, our source tree highlights a super vital distinction here, route parameters versus query parameters. Both of these are mechanisms for passing data through the URL, sure, but they do it in completely distinct ways. Route parameters embed the data directly into the core structure of the path itself, like a highly specific, non-negotiable street address. Query parameters, on the other hand, are all those extra details trailing at the very end of the URL, usually popping up after a question mark. They act a lot more like a filter, or maybe a sorting preference that the traveler just happens to be carrying with them. And notice how these two concepts sit side by side in the hierarchy. They're basically sibling branches under our main routing tree. Application developers use them together all the time to handle totally different types of data delivery. If you need to pinpoint a unique resource, boom, use a route parameter to hit that target directly. But if you just need to sort a list of products by price, you pour them through a query parameter filter. Together, they ensure the user's request is delivered with absolute precision. And that brings us to Section 4, navigation and security, getting from A to B and locking down the restricted areas. So moving further down our source tree, we arrive at navigation. If routes are the road signs we talked about earlier, navigation is the active vehicle.
Actually, it's the literal act of propelling the user from point A to point B across our established map. React Router provides these highly specific tools and programmable commands that allow the application to automatically drive a user to a new location. Like, say, immediately bouncing them to a success page after they submit a form or click a Buy Now button. It's the engine of our transit system.
But whoa, hold on a second. You can't just go anywhere you want, right? Sometimes you hit a digital wall. You don't always have the right credentials to enter a specific building.
And this perfectly illustrates our final source term, protected routes. Think of these as the VIP sections of our map, fully equipped with a very strict bouncer at the door. If a user tries to navigate to, say, their private account dashboard without actually being logged in, the protected route checks their credentials, instantly denies them entry, and safely redirects them right back to a public login page. It's the security guard for the entire application.
So, bringing this all back to our original source text, you can see just how much rich architectural context is packed into this seemingly sparse directory tree. By walking through it term by term, it perfectly outlines a massive, highly efficient digital transit system, everything from the foundational browser router all the way to the VIP security of protected routes. This single branch of text powers the modern web experiences that you and I use every single day.
So I want to leave you with this thought. The internet is no longer just a collection of static, disconnected pages. It's a fluid, seamlessly connected map. Next time a page instantly changes its layout, updates its data, or secures your private information without ever skipping a beat or reloading your browser, will you see the invisible map, the React Router, quietly guiding your way? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep looking for those structures hidden right beneath the surface.